those are listed for you.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes. Agenda item 4 is public testimony. At this time, we do not have anyone registered to testify. We thank you very much. Agenda item 5A is a report to the Committee on the Graduate Education Advisory Committee activities. We have Dr. Candy Tayebi, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Graduate Studies at Sam Houston State University. She's the current chair, interim chair of the GEAC. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, and good morning. Today I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we've been doing in the past year in the GEAC. There's really 3 main issues that we've been dealing with. The first is the issue of the use of the 18 characteristics for professional doctoral programs. As you know, currently, those 18 characteristics are used for research doctoral programs only right now. They are reported on and placed up on the institutional's websites. The original reason for doing the 18 doctoral characteristics was to help prospective students be able to compare programs and also to help the coordinating board have common benchmarks to assess the success of existing doctoral programs. When GEAC first looked at this, they recommended that the 18 characteristics not be used by the professional programs because they believed that the accreditation reports that they had to do had specific information that they needed to place up on their websites, and they thought that was sufficient. Since then, they've come back to us and asked us to relook at that issue and see if we could come up with some characteristics that are more appropriate to professional programs. So the next couple of months, and we've already started that discussion with the coordinating board staff, GEAC will be looking at some specific criteria for the professional programs. It won't be the same as the 18 characteristics, but some things that we think are more appropriate for the professional programs. So that was the first issue that we've dealt with this past year. The second is the criteria for the approval of new doctoral programs. And the first thing that we found out when we looked at this was that Texas is doing a really good job of approving and proposing doctoral programs that have a need and can be offered efficiently. So one of the things that we were shown is that in the last 5 years, the actual enrollments in the doctoral programs that were approved were actually much higher than the projected enrollments. And the actual costs, except for in law schools, was actually lower than the projected costs. So this really shows that the doctoral programs right now that are being proposed have a high need and are being able to be offered efficiently. The second thing is that less than 10% of those doctoral programs right now that are offered by institutions are offered, less than 10% are offered outside of research or emerging research institutions, which is about what you should expect, that most of those doctoral programs should be in the research and emerging. This shows us that we're also being very selective in the other regional universities of what they're putting forward for doctoral programs. So GEAC provided 6 recommendations which should be used for the approval of new doctoral programs. The first one is the most foundational, and that is that PhD programs should be approved based on a uniform set of rules regarding merit and the ability of the program to serve the needs of the region. One of the things that was discussed is this idea of should we be looking at the type of institution that is offering this. And what GEAC was really wanting to suggest is that regional institutions have shown the ability to produce successful and nationally recognized programs, the ability to retrain and recruit first-generation and minority students, and the ability to place graduates into academe in areas where their focus is more on teaching in those institutions and also in employment outside of academe. So they really believed that it was vital that when people were looking at doctoral proposals, they were not really looking at what type of institution was offering it, but at whether they could handle the type of doctoral program that they were asking for. The second proposal was that PhD programs should be evaluated on the ability to recruit and graduate diverse students. GEAC is very aware that the state's demographics are changing rapidly, and they wanted to be able to have all doctoral programs coming through address those needs of that changing demographic. The third recommendation is that PhD programs should be developed in niche areas that serve a particular region or population and are particularly suited to the institution's expertise. Obviously, we're aware that institutions have particular expertise. At Sam Houston, we're very well known for criminal justice, right? And so we realize that those institutions already are prepared and equipped and recognized in these areas. And so therefore, it would be easy for them to offer quality doctoral programs in particular areas. So we want, when they're asking to propose a doctoral program, that they're able to talk to us about how their institution is particularly suited for that particular type of doctoral program, realizing that not all doctoral programs should be at all institutions. And then finally, the fourth recommendation is that institutions must show that existing programs are graduating and employing their students. We also are very concerned that we don't want to large group of doctoral program students graduating but not being employed. So it's important for us that we also are showing that there is employment and that we can look at the existing doctoral programs and see if they are putting their students into the workforce. The fifth one is that institutions must show they can adequately provide financial support. Just as we as institutions are concerned about the debt that undergraduate students are incurring, we're also concerned at the graduate level. We want to ensure that our graduate students are fully funded to be able to handle their doctoral programs, so that if an institution is proposing a doctoral program, they're also showing how they can fund their students. And then finally, the last recommendation is that new programs must be able to demonstrate marketable skills that students will acquire. And again, we want to ensure that our doctoral students are graduating ready to be employed by the workforce. And so we are looking at the graduate level also and wanting to be able to show that our students have marketable skills. These last two kind of lead us to a third major issue that we've been dealing with in the GEAC, and that is that we're looking at a strategic plan for graduate education in Texas. And the GEAC believes that this plan should address four major areas. The first area is how to ensure participation and success of underrepresented groups, including minorities and first-generation students. And again, this is to show that if we're going to have a strategic plan in Texas, it's a little impossible for us to ignore the changing demographics and how we're going to address that at the graduate level. The second area that we would like the strategic plan to focus on is what metrics will be used to demonstrate outcomes for graduate programs to measure success. Clearly, we should be able to identify metrics so that we know when graduate education in Texas is being successful. And so we want to make clear in our strategic plan, what is it that lets us know, yes, our graduate education is being successful. The third is how graduate education will be funded. And as I said, this has been a real issue that's been discussed several times at GEAC. And there's really two main focuses that have happened this last year that we focused on. One is the lack of tuition waivers. One of the problems that our graduate programs face that's unique in Texas is the inability to give tuition waivers for our students at the graduate level. It makes it very difficult for our programs to compete for the top students across the nation, and it is something that the GEAC would like to see the state of Texas address, is this lack of tuition waivers. The second is a definition of full-time or part-time status in order to be eligible for financial aid and loan deferment. And the coordinating board staff was kind enough to look into the federal and state regulations for us, and the conclusion was that at the undergraduate level, full-time status is really reliant on student credit hours. But at the graduate level, it can be defined by the institutions, and it can include student credit hours, but it can also include research, assistantships, internships, et cetera, because they realize that a workload for a graduate student is a little different than what we would expect at the undergraduate. So GEAC would really encourage institutions to go back and re-examine their current definitions for graduate students for full-time and half-time status so that our students can have access to financial aid and also not have to repay their loans while they're still in school, and so that it will more accurately reflect what their actual workload is. So those are parts of what we would like to have part of the strategic plan. The last part that we think is very important to be part of the strategic plan is how we will show the markability of graduate education. So one of the things that we would like to have included is defining some marketable skills at the graduate level. We have in GIAC looked at some of the European institutions that are doing a really good job. Specifically, Austin Cunningham has given us some information from the Irish institutions that is really good about defining marketable skills at a graduate level. And so we're looking at how we can define those marketable skills for each of our programs. The other thing that's of a real issue is being able to track employment at the graduate level. It has been pretty successful for us to track employment at a doctoral level. It's part of our 18 characteristics. The programs are much smaller. It's a little easier to follow those students. It has been really difficult for institutions in the coordinating board to track employment at the master's level. And so we're looking into seeing what kind of solutions are out there to help us. We welcome anything that you find as well, because it is a real issue for us to be able to track at the master's level the employment, but we think that's an important part of any strategic plan. And finally, we'd like our strategic plan to talk about other avenues for employment outside academia. We think that's vital to our graduate students. So this plan will be developed over this next year, working with the coordinating board staff, and we would love any suggestions or feedback you have or ideas that you have for a strategic plan for graduate education that we haven't covered here. We're really excited about this. People have been doing a lot of legwork, and we really appreciate all that the coordinating board staff has done to help us on this as well. Finally, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that GIAC wants to emphasize that we believe graduate education is linked to the success in undergraduate education, to economic development, and to the quality of life in Texas. Strong graduate programs produce new technologies, new knowledge, and the cultural awareness to maintain global leadership for the state of Texas. A firm commitment to graduate education ensures the health of the economy and is vital to a strong Texas in the future. Thank you so much.
Wow, you've done a great job. That was a great report. So it's my understanding that in a year, then, you would have recommendations for us to approve. Is that the timeline?
That's what we're really looking at for that graduate strategic plan, is to be able to get it to you at the end of the year.
Commissioner, do you have any thoughts? Or?
Well, my first question is: Do you have a preliminary report, or because you were citing a lot of data that I would like to take a closer look at?
Sure. The beginning information that I gave you about the actual graduate programs, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That actually came from the coordinating board staff, and so I can talk to James Goman about giving that.
Okay.
It was in our minutes that we had some of that.
I look forward to meeting with the graduate deans tomorrow, and I'm very excited by what you've just described. It sounds to me like you're on precisely the right track, and as a former graduate dean myself, I admire your comprehensive approach to this issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, please feel free to give us any feedback or any suggestions you think would really help the strategic plan.
Dr. Tesher?
So I'm feeling free to give you feedback. First off, thank you for wading in. This is critically important, and I really appreciate what you're doing. One of the areas, and I think you brought it up and touched on it, we might have danced around it, is that there are certain locations, certain faculty, certain clusters of really critical information that make that the one institution or one of the key institutions to go to in the state of Texas. And yet we seem to have a rush to everyone has to have one of those duplication. So I would ask you to look at capacity issues for, let's use your institution, Sam Houston, criminal justice. Okay, if there's capacity, why do I need a duplication of that program somewhere else in the state if there's capacity, faculty, et cetera? So I think capacity is critical, and you define that and say, no, we have capacity to double the number of students in that discipline here. There's really no reason to recreate it somewhere else in the state. Thank you. You want to do what we're doing. We're already doing it. We're not at capacity. That will be one, because that's something I've faced as a coordinating board member, and I think it's a critical function of the coordinating board to be efficient with utilization. If the faculty are not maxed out and there's additional capacity, that will be very critical for us to understand. The second is, you talked about the definition of full-time student. Some of us, myself especially, do not agree with the federal definition of a full-time undergraduate student. That aside, I would ask you to define across the board, what is a full-time graduate student? What are you going to allow us to give credit for within that? I would like that answer to come from GIAC to us. This is what we think a full-time graduate student is. And let's have a definition that's not defined by the institution, but defined by the entire organization of GIAC and the coordinating board, that we can say, okay, but if you're involved in research, we're going to give you this amount of credit for that activity, and this amount for that activity, and this amount for credit hours, to be able to have a broad definition that is equally applied across the institutions and not necessarily individual institution defined. I would ask you to bring that back to us as well.
Let me just address a couple of things that you said. The first is the capacity issue, and you're absolutely right. There's definitely some time when there can be increased capacity one place instead of rebuilding that particular program another place. One of the things that was brought up in GIAC that I think was continuously noted is that because we have that changing demographics, one of the things that we are finding is a lot of, for example, our Hispanic students are wanting to stay homebound. They're wanting to stay in their particular region. And so sometimes being able to go to an institution that may be able to handle the issues of Hispanic students in a better way than maybe another institution is, and that is also kind of homebound, sometimes is helpful. So yes, capacity is definitely an important issue, and we do need to look at that. But there are also some other things that I think affect, especially some of our minority students as we're looking at this. We don't want reproduction all the way across, to keep constantly reproduce the same program across the state. I understand, you're exactly right. But I do think we want to also be aware there may be times when that's an important thing to do if we want to reach out to these particular types of students. The second thing is about the full-time. I do understand, and I think that we can give some guidelines on what to look at for the full-time status. I think that part of the reason that the federal government stayed broad was because that different programs really have different things that may affect that graduate student's workload. So we can give, I think, some very specific things that you can look at, but I think that programs may be different. For example, if I use my own institution, our clinical psychology has a year-long internship that's 1 credit hour, but it literally can't, the student is not allowed to work outside of that internship, and they spend all their time there. It's clearly a full-time job, but they're getting 1 credit hour, so that internship would make sense. On the other hand, our political science internship, it doesn't work like that. They go, they put in a few hours, they come back, they can still do other things. So it would not make sense for both of those internships to be the same thing, even though the credit hour appears to be the same. Does that make sense? So there's those variations, but I think you're exactly right. We could come up with some very clear guidelines to help follow for that full-time status. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and you're bringing up exactly the answer. 1 is not 1. 1 credit hour is not one full-time equivalent. So in the example is the recommendation should come back, this is a full-time activity and no other activity is permitted, okay? That's like carrying an 18-hour load. Okay, so that's what the definition needs to become. It's not like, well, if you're doing 12 hours, you're a full-time undergraduate student. That's my problem with it, because that doesn't lead to timely degree completion anywhere in the world if you do a semester.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting that you bring that up about the timely completion of the degree, because one of the things that this was brought up about is that we had a lot of students who are taking extra hours for dissertation, not because they're doing any more than if they were taking that 1 or 3 hours, but because it's the only way they can qualify for financial aid. And so literally we're having students taking extra hours for no other reason than to get themselves qualified, because the definitions that are being used by our institutions are so strictly by credit hours that it's making them do that. And that is a waste of time to be able to do that.
I'd like to make a comment about your concern about students who need to stay close to home. That's definitely an issue at the important in terms of undergraduate students. Perhaps it can work for professionally oriented doctorates and maybe for most masters, but one thing I've seen over the years that many students who don't understand that many of the PhDs they might receive, it's a national job market. And while they want to stay home, if they want to use their degree, they may have to move 1,000 miles to actually utilize that degree. And I think that too many students don't understand that. And so that's something we have to take into account.
No, I think that's a really good comment, David. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's part of that larger mix that, yes, we do have to look at all those factors that involve that issue.
Go ahead, John.
No, sir, go ahead.
Okay. In order to promote higher education for minorities and other people, is the institute provide weekend classes and evening classes? Because a lot of these people have to work to support their families. Are you trying to promote with the institute to offer classes on weekends and evenings?
Yeah, part of what we're hoping to do when we do that strategic plan is you saw the first issue, which is about addressing how do we ensure that our minorities and underrepresented groups, including first-generation students, get access to this education and can complete it. And some of those things are going to include online education, the ability to have weekend classes, lots of different variations on when classes and how classes are offered, and that flexibility, I definitely think is part of that. And I think that's been discussed at GEAC. When we're talking about how to address getting those, ensuring that we meet that market, it is also about some of those things that you're talking about there, and that should be part of that plan.
So, Doctor, I like the criteria that you all came up with for approving doctoral programs. And so I'd like to ask Dr. Peoples, what's the interaction there in terms of, do you all adopt those, or do you take them as advisory, or how does that work?
Well, we definitely take them as advisory, and I don't know what the percentage is precisely, but we probably accept 90% or better of the recommendations that they make, and the other 10% we probably accept in some form, but maybe with a slight twist or two. And so we've engaged in these conversations with GEAC over the past year, as Dr. Taibbi pointed out, and we have recently revised our doctoral proposal forms that incorporate most, and maybe all, I think, of the items that she just discussed, and those are currently being reviewed, and then once approved, then we'll actually incorporate those in our doctoral proposal forms.
Thank you.
I would just like to suggest that make sure that you heard our previous conversation about competency-based education, and that be included and a priority in the graduate programs.
Yeah, we actually, at this last GEAC meeting, had an introduction to the competency-based, and we've asked for some more follow-up from maybe some experts who have worked more at the graduate level on that, because a lot of the information we had was coming from kind of experiences at the undergraduate, and we have asked for more information. So the coordinating board staff is working to get us to have some people to come in and talk with us about defining that competency-based education and how it would work at the graduate level.
My other comment or question is that many of your statements were about new programs. If you make these recommendations, will people go back and kind of look at the old programs that maybe need to be updated, need to have more online? Is that going to be part of your recommendations?
Well, I think that the two separate things, one was the 4 new proposed programs, but the graduate education, the strategic plan for graduate education will actually be for old existing programs as well as new programs. So yes, when we're talking about having marketable skills, for example, that will be something that will go across both existing programs and new programs as well. Okay. And we're really are wanting to make sure that when we do this graduate education plan, that it's not one of those things that gets stuck on a shelf and never gets looked at, that this is something that we actually try to implement as we go through this.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Christina.
I'm not sure this issue falls under your umbrella, but if we're looking at a future strategic plan, an issue that I have seen and definitely experienced is that there are a lot of undergraduate degree programs are field specific to a field that requires a master's degree. And the undergraduate programs are accepting lots of students in there, but there are not enough graduate slots. And so the students that don't get accepted into the master's degree program have a degree that is specific for something that requires a master's or doctorate degree, but what do they do then? They can't practice. And so there's a disconnect of what kind of employment can I get with this degree that I need a master's degree for, but there's not enough slots, so I can't get there. Would something like that be influenced in your strategic plan?
Actually, that has not come up, and that's a very great idea. It's not something that we have discussed. I'll definitely bring that back to GAC to take a look at. I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I'm aware that it happens. Had not even thought about it. So that's a great suggestion, and I'll take that back to them.
And I'd just like to note that's one reason we're counting master's degrees in 60 by 30 for the completion goal when we did not before. Mm-hmm. It was a good point.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming today.
If I could just make a couple of quick comments on that. Regarding existing graduate degree programs, they're all required to go through a review process every 7 years. And they are required to be reviewed by external consultants, and those reports are then sent to us, which we then review and make comment back to the institutions. And so one of the things that we can and will do going forward in those reviews is make sure that we include elements that are germane to both the graduate education strategic plan and elements that are germane to the strategic plan itself. And the other comment I'd like to make is about the fact that I think we just signed an agreement with the RAND Corporation to help us conduct a study that looks at how to better define, both for coordinating board staff, but also for institutions, how to better define and identify a workforce need as well.
And just add, they'll be doing that in a national context as well.
Good. Thank you. All right. Agenda item 5B is a report to the committee on the Certification Advisory Council activities. This is information only, and Rex will bring that report.
Yes, unfortunately, the chair of that committee, Dr. Carolyn Wilson, who was supposed to deliver this report, came down ill last night and is unable to be with us today, so you'll have to suffer through my report. The Certification Advisory Council, or the CAC, is authorized under statute to act as an advisory council to the coordinating board, and they provide us with advice and recommendations, particularly regarding the standards and procedures that deal with Chapter 7 schools. And they have three major tasks assigned to them. One is to review site visit reports and the institution's response for a certificate of authority application. And they also make recommendations to the board about whether to recognize an institution operating under a certificate of authority or not. And then they also review requests by those accrediting bodies that wish to be recognized by the state of Texas. And so you may recall that to get a certificate authorization in Texas, then one of the things that the institutions that seek one must adhere to is that they be recognized by one or possibly more, but at least one of the accrediting bodies that the coordinating board itself recognizes. And there are currently 13 of those in addition to the regional accrediting bodies. And so we also rely on CAC then to also review those applications and make recommendations about whether we should recognize those accrediting bodies or not. The committee itself meets on a quarterly basis as needed. They met twice last year. Two of the items that will follow this agenda item are recommendations for extending the certificates of authority for the two schools in Texas that currently operate under a certificate of authority. And one of the items that was previously approved by this board was to recognize the accrediting body for the Association of Advanced Rabbinical and Talmudic Schools as one of those recognized accrediting bodies for the state of Texas. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
If there are none, then we'll go on to the next agenda item. 5C is consideration of adopting the Certification Advisory Council's recommendation to the committee relating to a request from the Baptist Hospitals of Southeast Texas School of Radiologic Technology for a third certificate of authority to grant degrees in Texas. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. The Baptist Hospitals of Southeast Texas School of radiologic technology has been around in one form or another since 1951, and they currently offer an associate's degree in radiography, and this would be their third certificate of authority. Institutions are allowed to operate under a certificate of authority for a maximum of 8 years while they seek accreditation elsewhere. And we know that the Baptist Hospitals of Southeast Texas have sought accreditation already from the Joint Review Committee on Education in Radiologic Technology, better known as JCERT, and that is a program certification for radiology, but they're also seeking institutional accreditation from the Accrediting Bureau of Health Education Schools, which is one of the accrediting bodies that's recognized by the coordinating board. So they are in that process. Part of what we ask them to do when they submit for another certificate of authority is to document that they're involved in that process and where they are in that process of seeking accreditation.
And what kind of degree do they get when they graduate?
They get an associate's degree in radiological science. And we have someone from the institution here, which is Ms. Deborah Smith, is here to ask, again, also from the institution, that would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Board members, any questions?
Disclosure, I'm a member of the medical staff at the Baptist Hospital in Beaumont and a former chief of staff. And I recognize your blue badge.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Smith, since you traveled to our meeting, we'll give you a few minutes to make a presentation to us if you'd like.
Well, like you guys said, we've been around since 1951. My predecessor, Ms. Carolyn Nicholas, was our director for 40 years. I had huge shoes to fill, but we have been very successful. We had a 100% pass rate for our graduates in August of 2015. Our average was in 87 for the 18 graduates. So academically, we're doing well. Listening to some of the previous speakers, we do competency-based clinical for the clinical end of our courses. So I think Dr. Tischer could probably vouch for the fact that we have very competent graduates, and we're very proud of our associates program.
How many people a year? Do you have 2 graduating classes or just 1?
2. We have a first-year class and a second-year class. Our maximum capacity is 30 per class, but currently we're running at 11 and 15. With the job market and a competing university down the road, it floods the market if we take more than that into the program.
Any other questions from board members?
I would only give my own testimony that their success with their graduates are extremely competent. They come out day one, ready to go, do high-quality work, and they're a tremendous asset to the region, and really is a regional institution where folks that would not otherwise have that available to them as a career pathway, and very, very necessary for our regional health sciences. So I would move approval.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much for being here. Agenda item 5D is consideration of adopting the Certification Advisory Council's recommendation to the committee relating to a request from the Southwest School of Art for a second certificate of authority to grant degrees in Texas. Dr. Peoples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Southwest School of Art seeks its second certificate of authority. It is in the process, as is the other school, of seeking accreditation, in this case, from both the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, better known as SAC-COC, but they're also seeking accreditation from the National Association of Schools of Art and Design. In that particular case, it's like a lot of program accrediting bodies, they require that you have at least 1 graduate before you actually seek accreditation, and they will be graduating their first BFA shortly, I believe. And we do have Dr. Edward Dupuy, I think it is the Chief Academic Officer at the Southwest School, who is here to answer any questions, if you may have any.
Good morning. What town is this school located in?
It's in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, okay. Southwest is a big area. Very good. And what's your current enrollment?
36.
36. Board members, any questions?
Yes, sir. Just take a few minutes. You have the floor to give us a little presentation.
Sure. The Southwest School of Art was founded in 1965, primarily as a community art school. It was founded in La Villita, the marketplace of San Antonio, and it moved to its current location in the late 1970s, which is an old Ursuline convent. The BFA program was a natural extension of the community art programs. We offer children's programming, we offer teens programming, we offer adult programming. We didn't really offer any programming for the college age demographic. And so we had the faculty already. We had the studios, some of the best probably in the Southwest. And we thought this would be a natural extension of what we already do. As you can tell, it's going to be a very small program. We anticipate a growth up to about 150 to 170 over the next 10 years. We do hope to offer a Master of Fine Arts at some point in the future. Right now, we just want to stabilize the BFA program and make sure that we're doing everything right with the undergraduate program.
So since this is a hometown institution, I'll move approval.
Oh, great. Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much for being here. Agenda item 5E1 is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to a request for a new degree program from Texas A&M University for a Master of Science degree with a major in energy. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. This is a proposed Master of Science program in energy, which is a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary degree that covers all of the fields of energy, as you can see from the blue pages, everything from extraction and refining to the delivery of energy itself, and it seeks to build students for managerial and leadership positions within the energy industries. There is only one other program in the same zip code in the state of Texas, and that's at the University of Texas at Austin. And from all of the research that we can do on our end and research provided by the institution, there seems to be a very strong job market for students with these kind of degrees. And we do have Dr. Chris Flautis, thank you, and Dr. Stratos
Pistikopoulos.
Yes. Thank you.
Say it, Rick.
No, you really don't want to. You really don't want me to try to do that. But they'd be glad to answer any questions about the program if you have any. So thank you all for being here.
Doctors, tell us about yourselves, how you got involved in this program.
I joined Texas A&M February 1, and Professor Pistikopoulos joined January 1 of 2015. After spending 29 years of my whole academic career at Princeton University, I decided to join Texas A&M University as the director of the Energy Institute, which is a university-wide initiative that faces the grand challenge called energy, as well as an endowed chair in chemical engineering. Professor Pistikopoulos?
Yes, I joined from Imperial College London, specifically coming to Texas and College Station at Texas A&M to be part as an associate director, as a deputy director of the Energy Institute, and also as an endowed chair at Texas A&M University Department of Chemical Engineering. So in a way, we have joined forces specifically to take the leadership of the Energy Institute at Texas A&M, as well as to promote a number of initiatives towards research, education, which is this master program, and external relationships, and so forth.
So Dr. Flauta said, what did you do at Princeton?
I'm a chemical engineer in my training, so I had appointments, my primary appointment in chemical engineering, appointments in the program of applied computational mathematics, appointment in the Genomics Institute on Quantitative Biology, as well as an appointment in Operational Research and Financial Engineering. Princeton is a small university, an elite private university, and typically faculty members who have an expertise in a domain, they're being invited so as to be affiliated faculty members. That means that you can take PhD students from all 4 places, in my case, but you don't have teaching requirements. I only had teaching requirements in chemical engineering.
Well, just a comment, pretty impressive what Texas A&M is doing, isn't it?
Commissioner.
Well, I think you need to congratulate the Chancellor, John Sharp, as well as the current governor for continuing what is called the Chancellor's Research Initiative, from trying to attract distinguished scientists and engineers who are members of the national academies into the great state of Texas.
And I'll just ask your college.
Amen. Amen.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'll ask your colleague. So tell me about the transition from London to College Station.
It required some energy to do this. So the Energy Institute, still, we are half of the family. We are here, half still are in London. So we are still in transition phase, and so all these initiatives pave the way towards making this transition energetically more feasible. Yeah. So
one important point that I want to point out: we both moved from institutions that are worldwide recognized, with a lot of laurels actually on us, and we moved to Texas A&M University so as to create things. So we did not move for any other purposes. Professor Pistikopoulos has half his family because of the age of his children actually in London and the other half actually at College Station. I'm lucky enough to have our daughter graduating from Princeton and actually being out of home, so we don't have these issues. But we are here to create things and to participate in elevating Texas A&M University, the Energy Institute, and the Chemical Engineering Department.
Commissioner.
Well, I simply have a practical question. This degree program is a 10-month program consisting of at least 32 semester credit hours. That's a very heavy load at the graduate level.
Yes. So let me
32 hours in 10 months.
So let me describe, first of all, actually, the goals of the program. It is, you are absolutely correct. We aim for a fast graduation rate, 10 months, initiating September 1, ending end of June. 2 semesters plus a couple of months. The audience is twofold. We aim for graduates who are recent graduates from any place in Texas, any place in the United States, North and South America, Asia, Europe, Middle East. So it is an international program. We aim for the next generation of educated leaders in energy who are familiar with all facets of energy. We as chemical engineers love oil and gas. All my work has been in the petrochemical industry. However, we are clever enough to see that the landscape of energy is much broader and it has many opportunities. And we have a horizon that is several decades ahead of us. Therefore, we have as academics the obligation to educate the new generation of leaders on introducing them to all facets of energy. So let me give you a few examples. Suppose you have the subject, let's say, of unconventional gas, very important technical subject. You have the subject of systems, optimization, analysis, simulation methods, so as to analyze this. You also have subjects like environmental issues and bioenergy. You also have the smart grid, which is very important. On top of that, you may have materials, multifunctional materials for storage, for instance, storage applications. But is energy only technically dominated? And the answer is no. We also have connections to economics. Therefore, we're going to introduce in this program modules that are half of a course, that introduce the students into the boundaries that are diffusive between economics and energy, entrepreneurship and energy. And these are 2 examples, accounting and energy. So these are very important because they introduce the students into economic as well as entrepreneurship components. But on top of that, we have public policy. So we have leaders from the Bush School of Government Public Policy at Texas A&M introducing modules about policy and energy. Then we have two outstanding colleagues from Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas A&M Law School, where they are going to introduce the connections between energy and law. And we're very happy to see that. So this particular program is administered by the Energy Institute. It is university-wide, and it has all the colleges involved. And it is open to all of the students with the primary focus of introducing into the subjects. Again, don't forget, a master's thesis and a master's actually degree is breadth first. All of us have been educated with what I call depth first approach. We went into a particular degree in engineering, and then we went down for our PhD, and then we sort of went around this to expand a bit our horizon. Think about the new generation. They graduate, and they would like to see what are the opportunities in solar, in wind, in oil and gas, unconventional gas, in materials, in the connections with policy. I think they should be much better educated than we were, so as to have all the facets of energy covered, and then take a decision to go for graduate studies, for a PhD, or to go actually into a particular sector of the industry. And that is the one part of the students that we're aiming. We are also aiming for students who are actually 3, 5, 10 years in industry. They are doing spectacularly well, and they may be thinking about a transition phase. But in the place that they were experts in one domain of energy. So what about an opportunity to go through distance learning or through a 10-month reduced period, albeit actually intensive, to spend that so as to be educated in another domain and then contribute to their company or to their own actually goals that they set forward. So these 32 student credit hours for the 10 months, it is module-based, where a module is 10 days, 5 of which are teaching, so it is 4.5 hours per day. So that is the equivalent actually of half a course. So it is introduction to the material. And then we have a number of modules for those who take it with thesis, and a large number of modules for those who take it actually just with courses.
And I think a key element in delivering, let's say, successfully a program like this, because it has been designed by to be a fast track, is the fact that all the course and modules that Chris talked about are tailor-made. So we're not taking courses, existing courses, and we put together an ad hoc master program. All the courses, and we guarantee, we do the quality control, we have talked to the colleagues, they provide the curriculum, all will be bespoke material specifically for the course, designed for these 5 days and 2 weeks periods that we're talking about. Therefore, that will ensure, A, that we can deliver on time, B, that we can ensure the quality control, and C, that we will deliver the course objectives in providing this panoramic view of the energy, everything we'd like to know on all the aspects of energy, and arguably much, much more.
If I may add something on this, the University of Texas at Austin has a program for a number of years, which we like. And we are more than 60 miles away, obviously, according to our driving. But at the same time, we don't like to sort of replicate things. We want to do unique things. And if you pay careful attention and if you check all the data that exists, any of the energy institutes in the world, you will not find a similar program worldwide. So we are going to pioneer, upon your approval, a new program that is going to lead into new educated leaders in energy in all facets.
If I'm an employer, I would take my rising stars and I would pay for them to have this program. I'm telling you, if I'm in energy, I would select my rising stars, and they would be committed to my company for 5 years, but I'm going to pay for that course. Yes. It would just bring so much value. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Dr. Tesher has a question.
I'm feeling tired and I need energy. How do I apply?
For an individual like yourself who has exemplary record and qualifications, this program is not good enough. However, we have in the works another program that we plan to put forward, and this is going to be a collaboration between the Mace Business School and the Texas A&M Energy Institute, and that will be for executives. This is a new category that also would benefit from this broad education actually on energy and energy matters. So I think...
And that gets to my question. My question was, it sounds like this is a residence course, in-residence course. Will there be an opportunity to do some of it distance learning and then some of it in residence, and that's where you're going to evolve to the executive?
No, even on this one, upon approval, we plan to start immediately applying for the distance learning program. We have talked with the right individuals at Texas A&M whose job is just distance learning. So we plan for the first year to videotape all the lectures and to initiate the distance learning program September 2017.
And for the
year afterwards.
And for the executive program that you are asking, which will be planned for later on, I think the business school have identified that they need technology input. You know, so for the executives, very often they see through their courses that there is a gap between, there is a lot of the financial analysis, market analysis, but where is the technology? So there is a gap for technology type of training, and that's how the two programs will be planned to merge and be offered at the executive level down the road.
We have another question.
This is if you don't mind, I'll just ask one last question.
Yes.
This is a request for a master's, and you have a number of PhD and master's programs around this area. Do you see in the future a PhD program in energy, or is this just a unique place in that you would PhD in a single discipline of engineering?
I think you touched a very important problem, and this is actually, we started, as I pointed out, February 1. It is a very vibrant energy institute that now has 225 faculty members. We created the Energy Research Society of PhD students and postdocs that have a membership over 400. So it's a very exciting time to be at Texas A&M. So yes, what you are suggesting is a possibility, is something that is in our radar. We are interested in establishing a PhD program, but we would like to go stage-wise. First, establish a first-rate, internationally renowned program on Master of Science in Energy, and then depending on the success story and the interest on campus and the growth plans of the universities, we may come back to you.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. In your studies, what I gather, you do economic models for different source of energy, which is most economical for different region. Am I correct?
Among the many things that we do, both of us actually do in our research, it is one of the components. So just for myself, I have done a lot of work on energy integration throughout the beginning actually started with my PhD thesis on process synthesis, analysis, simulation, optimization of chemical processes, on distillation columns. We do work on carbon capture, utilization and storage. We do work on novel processes for the future actually chemical plants that may utilize hybrid resources, hybrid feedstocks, biomass, natural gas, coal, petroleum. Yeah. So these are actually a very large sets of domains. But of course, we do take an economic analysis because in order to support all these results, you need to have a very rigorous quantitative framework. And this is based on not just simple economic analysis, but it is based on very rigorous optimization methods that go into what is called deterministic global optimization.
And in fact, the key issue very often in policy issues for energy matters, and we see, for instance, even nations like Germany, which go to work a specific energy direction, very often the policy making does not quite match with what the technology can offer. So specifically the type of research that we are conducting and even the master program that we are trying to aim is to bridge this gap. So when you make policy making, to build this not only on economy models, which are really simplistic input-output type of models, if I may say, but to capture the various types of technologies in a quantitative way so that you analyze properly various trade-offs. So this quantitative energy systems approach that we are advocating will be at the heart of the decision making as part of the course, but also it is our philosophy in our research.
So we would like to create graduates of our program who are going to be quantitatively educated. They can analyze different process alternatives from the process viewpoint, from the materials viewpoint, from the economic viewpoint, connect these to policy, connect these to risk, connect these to uncertainty, because you need to provide guidance and to make educated decisions for policymakers.
I understand that, but do you have compared any, like what it costs to generate per BTU solar energy versus wind energy versus hydrocarbon?
We have extensive studies on this.
This is very much the line of research we are doing, and not only in terms of value, dollar value per BTU, comparing different type of technologies, but also in terms of energy efficiency, for example, what the bottlenecks are, what is the impact on, on CO2 and environmental. So
That's right.
A whole trade-off of, let's say, the whole analysis of the various factors and parameters which may affect selecting technology X versus Y, and then as a function of time, because very often technologies are evolving as a function of time, so we do this type of analysis.
I'm just curious, what results do you come up, what conclusions do you come up in the future?
Let me just point out something, actually, just as a point of reference, because your question is very important, but it's also general.
We're going to have to stick with the motion for now. Can we continue this discussion later and in respect of everybody's time? I can tell that this is going to be a very successful program. I do have a motion. If there's no other discussion about...
I'll second.
And we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Before you leave, so one of our colleagues here is actually a very successful energy company owner right here, Mr. Anwar. So you all need to just continue your discussions.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say, before you leave, thank you very much for your presentation. Before you leave, we also have board members, Princeton graduate, Mr. Steen, and Aggies, our chairman, Mr. Jenkins.
Welcome to Texas.
Welcome to Texas.
Now, Texas A&M is actually the institution that we work, but having spent 29 years at Princeton and loving the place, and having such great colleagues, I know the quality of education that is being offered, and I see actually that there are many similar things between Texas A&M and Princeton in terms of the alumni, the love for the place.
See what I've been telling you?
Thank you all. Yeah, and if you get homesick, there's a direct here from Bergstrom to Heathrow on British Air's every day.
All right, agenda item 5E2 is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to a request for a new degree program from Texas A&M University Texarkana for a Doctor of Education degree with a major in education leadership. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. The EDD program in educational leadership would be the first doctoral program at Texas A&M Texarkana. It's actually the outgrowth, though, of a cooperative doctoral program between Texarkana and Texas A&M University Commerce. And what has happened over the years is that the Commerce decided that they wanted to go in one particular direction in terms of instructional technology and pursue a purely online degree program, while students in Texarkana expressed a desire for more face-to-face interaction. And so Texarkana is actually proposing a hybrid program that is roughly 51% face-to-face and 49% online, or roughly 50-50 program designed to cater to the students that they have. It's important to note that during their tenure as a cooperative program with Commerce, Texarkana met its graduation requirements in terms of students, and they've met their enrollment numbers. They took a little bit of a dip in enrollment while using the term loosely, sort of the controversy with Commerce was being worked out in terms of how to offer the program. But I think another compelling point for this particular program is that if you look at that particular part of Texas, It is well over 100 miles to the nearest program from Texarkana, and there is only 3% of the professionals in public education in Texas in that region have a doctoral degree. So we feel that this would actually fill a very strong need there. And we do have some folks from Texas A&M University, Texarkana, that are here that can answer any questions you might have. Dr. Glenda Ballard, the Dean of the College of Education and Liberal Arts, and Dr. Roseanne Stripling, who's the Provost and Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, is also here.
I would assume you also have people from Arkansas coming over. Probably the best place to come is to Texarkana. There's not any good places in Arkansas to get your doctorate. So, ladies, thank you so much for being here today. Your enrollment in education, and you think prospectively you would see how many graduates? You have to push that little red button.
Good morning. We're so pleased to be here. We anticipate we're going to be working on quality as opposed to quantity, and we're anticipating taking a cohort of students of about 12 to 15 students. And we've designed our program so that we're going to be promoting quality, and we're going to be working with students towards success. So I think that we will have a high percentage of graduates. It's a 3-year program.
What about competency-based education built in there?
I'm so glad you asked that. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we walked in right as the CBA report was given this morning, and Glenda and I were both talking under our breath. We started CBA. We weren't calling it competency-based education in 2002. Mm-hmm. In our new superintendent preparation program, which is a postmaster's program and not a degree program, we actually developed a process using a rubric and a portfolio and 3 readers to review the portfolio. We developed a process in which we provided eligibility or credit for courses in our superintendent program for people who were already in the field, as the commissioner mentioned earlier, and practicing those competencies.
Those are all the terms. You're right.
And specifically, we had a CFO, a chief financial officer in our program, and there we didn't see any need for him to take the finance course. Mm-hmm. And we didn't just give him credit because he was a CFO. We actually, as I said, developed the process, and he submitted his credentials, and he did not have to take that course. And he didn't even have to take another course because it was not a degree-based, so it wasn't a matter of him having to have a particular number of hours.
Great.
So, yes, we're into CBA big time.
Discussion?
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much for driving all of this way. Or you probably flew.
And thank you. We did fly.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item 5F is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to funding for the Texas Teacher Residency Program by the 84th Texas Legislature. Rex.
Thank you. The Teacher Residency Program was actually created by the 83rd Texas Legislature, and the basic idea behind it is to provide an opportunity for folks to not only be certified to teach, but also to obtain a master's degree at the same time. But it also provides for very hands-on mentorship in the program. And as a result, teachers are required to, as the name implies, they are required to be in residence in this program. And so, in essentially, a lot of what happens is they take some coursework in the summer, they spend a year in the schools being mentored one-on-one by a teacher who also goes through a process to be established as a mentor. And then they do some coursework, and at the end of this particular program, they're both certified to teach, and they have a master's degree as well. The program is housed at Texas A&M University Commerce, and they work with the Mesquite Independent School District. And they've also partnered with UT Tyler, who works with rural school districts in an effort to also increase teachers out there. The program is relatively new. They will graduate their first cohort of students in August. Actually, they should have already graduated some students already, and we believe that about 25 or so actually graduated in August. And so this approval of this item would continue to fund that program for the next biennium. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 5G is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to funding appropriated to the Joint Admissions Medical Program by the 84th Texas Legislature. Rex.
Okay, this would approve funding of the Joint Admissions Medical Program, or better known as the JAMP program. The JAMP program is designed to take students who are economically disadvantaged and provide them with opportunities at the undergraduate level through medical school to receive counseling, to receive help with tuition and fees and books. If the student completes the program, they're guaranteed admission to a Texas medical school. It's been very successful during its lifetime. As you can see, there's been more than 1,000 students have interacted with them. There have been 242 JAMP graduates in their first 5 classes, and 165 of those entered medical residencies in Texas, and 63% are training to become primary care physicians. So by all accounts, this has been a very successful program. The legislature funded it at the same level that it was funded for the previous 2 years, and this will authorize us to, in essence, transfer the money to the entity at UT that manages it for us.
Move approval.
Aye. Next.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. Discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 5H is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to issuance of a request for applications for the Graduate Medical Education Planning and Partnerships Grants Program. Rex.
Thank you. So the planning, and it actually has a new name, the Planning and Partnership Grant Request Awards Program. But in a lot of ways, it's a continuation of the planning grants that have been around for some time now. And it's designed to establish new residency programs in those places that do not have the programs already. And what they get is planning grants for this. There's a total of $3.5 million available for it. It is competitive. We awarded $1.35 million to 9 applicants before, and 5 of those have established GME programs. 8 programs have received national accreditation so far, and 5 of those programs have already begun accepting residents as well.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item 5I is on the consent calendar. Item 5J is a report on the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Improvement Act, which funds colleges for basic and leadership grants. Information only.
Okay, and I'll try to make this a rather brief report. I think the blue pages have a pretty thorough report of the funds available, but as you know, the state of Texas receives Perkins funds from the federal government, 70% of which goes to public education at TEA, and 30% comes to the coordinating board, and roughly $25 million or so. And 85% of that money is designated to basic grants. And basic grants are really an allocation methodology. It's based on the number of students that are enrolled in CTE programs at 2-year institutions that are also receiving Pell Grants. And then those funds are awarded for equipment purchases, but also for help to special populations. It's used for a variety of purposes that can include things like note takers, readers. It can be used for child care. And so various institutions use those funds in the way that they see fit to try to ensure the success of their students. But a lot of the money does go toward equipment purchases for CTE programs so that they can maintain up-to-date equipment to train students on. And so 85% of those funds are tied up into basic grants, and you can see the amount of money that each of the two-year institutions in Texas received through that basic allocation. 10% of the money is set aside for what are called leadership grants, and these grants are designed to pursue curriculum improvement, to look at some of the performance measures that are given to us by the federal government, and to work on those. And on page 4 of your brief pages under item 5J, you will see the list of institutions that received leadership grants. We received 16 pre-applications. We asked for 9 full proposals, and then 8 of those proposals were funded. And you can see there the 8 that were funded, and you'll notice that the first one that went to Austin Community College deals with company-based education and information technology, and they're going to try to deal with that. And then the second one is, which is very much tied to this whole effort around competency-based education, and really a lot of our discussion revolves around how do you give students credit for what they already know. Mm-hmm. And that involves prior learning assessment. And so Dallas County is going to also look at those issues and try to help other institutions with their prior learning assessment of the skills and knowledge that a student brings in that can be applied to CTE courses. And then I'll be glad to answer any other questions you may have about this.
I have a question.
Sure.
How is the process that you're looking at to give credit for previous knowledge and skills different than what's already in place? Because I know that when I was in undergrad, we could test out of courses. So how is what you're proposing different than what's already here?
Well, what Dallas can, well, it's part of that, and there are a number of initiatives already underway. Probably the most popular one is Credit for Heroes, that tries to map the skills and knowledge learned in the military to civilian skills that are then mapped to courses. And so what the Dallas Prior Learning Assessment Training and Development project will be about is not just how do you identify the skills, and what we're not really good at in a lot of ways is actually giving credit for those prior skills. Now, there are already a lot of CTE courses for which we give what are often referred to as the competency exam. Or so a student comes in and says, well, I already know how to rebuild and repair transmissions. And so they're oftentimes given a departmental course designed to illustrate that they know that. Some of this is also based toward looking at a more competency-based approach, so that in that particular example, rather than giving a test, you might actually ask the student to give them a scenario with a transmission and ask them to actually make the repair. So they're going to be looking at a lot of different options on direct assessment and also indirect assessment of PLA. But you're absolutely correct that a lot of this, there's a lot of work being done. And one of the things that these leadership grants are designed to do is to also take work that's done at an institution and disseminate that statewide, so that other institutions can also, rather than having to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, on their own, but they can also take what the other institutions have been doing and use it themselves. So part of the requirement for this is that the information be disseminated and that it be made available statewide.
But I want to emphasize part of what Rex said is that part of prior learning assessment in certain areas is that you can take what you know but apply it to other settings, different settings from which you may have acquired those skills. So they're not just contingent upon one auto body shop or one ad agency, that you could apply them to other settings.
Thank you. Next item, 5K, a report to the Committee on School Closures and or Teach-Outs pursuant to Chapter 7, Subchapter A, Section 7.75. Rex.
Thank you. This is our routine report that we give on closures for the Chapter 7 schools, which again are typically proprietary schools operating in Texas. And you will see that this time the report is shorter than it was last time. I think it's about half or less of what it was last time. And there are only 2 institutions involved. Lighthouse College, and 2 campuses of the University of Phoenix. And I'm sure you've probably read something about the drastic drops in enrollment that University of Phoenix has had of late, and that they have closed a number of institutions, particularly their face-to-face institutions across the country. And so these are 2 of those, one in Austin and then one in Houston. And in both of these cases, they are part of a larger corporate entity, and so issues of teach-out and transcripts have been addressed adequately in these cases.
So, Dr. Peoples, we've had a lot of discussions lately about these Chapter 7 institutions, but and I just glanced through your summary here, but this looks like that in these instances it worked like it should?
Yes, sir. Yeah, in this case, things went the way they were supposed to go. Yes, sir.
Other questions? Moving on, agenda item 5L is lunch. We're going to push that to the end of the agenda. Agenda item 5M, our proposed rule. Agenda items 5M 1 through 6. Let's see, proposed rules. Were those on the consent calendar?
No, items 5M2 and 5M3
Oh, okay.
are not on the consent calendar. The others are.
Right. So 1 is on the consent calendar, so we're going to go to 5M2, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the proposed new Chapter 4, Subchapter S, Sections 4.310 to 4.317 of Board Rules concerning participation in the state authorization
Reciprocity agreement.
Thank you. Agreement.
Yes.
Thank you. Rex.
Okay, you may remember seeing these as emergency rules in July, but in both item 5M2 and 5M3 deal with the same issue, in that in terms of the rules process, it allows the coordinating board to act as the portal for the national state authorization reciprocity agreement. And the reason these are not on consent is because we did receive a comment on the rules, and the comments again refer to both items. The item 5M2 refers to the rules that deal with public institutions, and then 5M3 refer to the rules that deal with private and proprietary institutions in Texas. But the comment that was received on both of them is that the way SARA is structured, they require institutions to abide by what are referred to as, often referred to as CRAC rules, which is the, when I had this earlier, the Council of Regional Accrediting Commissions guidelines for offering purely online programs. Our current rules state that the institutions must abide by best practices as identified by the state. And so one of the things that we're going to, we can't change the SARA rules, but one of the things that we're going to look at then as staff is to look at the CRAC rules, to look at the rules and best practices required by the Southern Association of Colleges, schools as well, and look at the best practices as identified by the coordinating board. And what I can tell you already is that there is a lot of commonality across all 3 of those. Best practices tend to be best practices, whether they're identified by one entity or another. And what we hope to do then is to line all that up and codify it so that institutions are not faced with trying to adhere to 3 different sets of criteria that are very, in the end, that are very, very similar anyway.
I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Dr. Peebles, just to clarify, who did you get the comment from exactly?
The comment came from, I do not remember. Who was it in? Oh, no, there, I'm sorry. It's right there. It came from the University of North Texas system, and we received another comment from the Texas Tech University system. Mm-hmm. And both address the same issue. And both well taken, by the way.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 5M3 is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the proposed new Chapter 7, Subchapter B, Sections 7.50 to 7.57 of Board Rules concerning participation, again, in the State Authorization of Reciprocity Agreement.
So move.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda items 5M4, 5, and 6 are on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5N1 is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.54 and 4.58 of Board Rules concerning the Texas Success Initiative to support developmental education reform efforts. These rules were adopted as emergency rules at the July 2014 board meeting, and they were also filed as proposed rules to allow for a 30-day comment period. I believe we have Kristen to present this. So.
Hi. These rules, as you have heard at the board meeting, are a direct reflection of changes made in Senate Bill 1776. These regard the exemption to TSI enabled by successful completion of a college prep course. The changes moved the time period from 12 months to 24 months for how long the exemption would be valid, as well as requiring that students, as part of the exemption, that students, once they enroll in higher education within that first year, they also enroll in what's called the first college level course in the content area. So if the exemption was earned in reading and writing, the student then would immediately enroll in that first year in, say, an English 1301 course. Both of those requirements are part of have to be met for the exemption to be valid. The second change pertained to if a student then did not successfully complete that course. So that means if a student did not earn a C or better, that the institution would advise the student of non-course-based remedial options. There's no requirement, however, that the student follow that advice, and there's no requirement that that advice be followed for the exemption to remain valid. But it gives the institution that opportunity to recommend developmental support so as to help the students succeed in their future coursework. This would have been on consent, except we did receive one comment. The comment was mostly with regard to implementation and the hows of that. We've taken from that comment the direction to go ahead and put together an FAQ that staff will be working on to help give a little guidance to institutions.
Board members, any comments, questions?
So the comment was from
University of Texas.
Hillary.
Actually, it was from the individual. Hillary Prochnow. She was very clear that the comment was not from the University of Texas per se, but rather from her individually.
And what interest does she have in it, or?
I know that she is both an instructor of reading and writing, integrated reading and writing, or has been in the past, and is currently a program director, or coordinator, in the School of Undergraduate Studies. I think she has been active in developmental education and higher education for some time.
Comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda items 5N2 and 5N3 were on the consent calendar. Agenda item 6 is adjournment. At this point, some members will stay here to eat lunch, but there will not be a quorum. Three at least 3 are leaving, and that would only leave, I believe, 1 person actually on the committee. So we will adjourn. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. No, there won't be.
What constitutes a quorum? 5. No, we only have 8.
Okay.
4.
So you're leaving, I'm leaving, you're leaving.
I'll leave if we need to, because I don't know how you're going to reconvene us. No, I don't know how you're going to reconvene us. I understand what
Yeah,
you're saying.
right.
If others stay to
Okay.
have lunch, we may not be able
Okay.
to reconvene.
Well, then you.
I can leave.
No, it's up to you. You could reconvene us and adjourn.
Who is
Would that-
staying to eat lunch and
Yeah.
can reconvene in, say, 15 minutes?
1, 2,
But you can be a
But you're a
reconvene.
board member.
You're a board member.
3, 4, 4.
So if we have 4 here that stay, is that
Quorum.
not a quorum of the board?
It's not a quorum of the committee.
No, the committee is disbanded. Yeah. Okay, so I think we can adjourn.
We have a motion. Who seconded? You moved. Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I think it's your presence
Well done.
is the problem. Yeah.